Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we unearth surprising connections and navigate the currents of history to bring you insights that truly stick.
It's great to be digging into another fascinating topic.
Absolutely. And today, we're plunging into a historical riddle it's really compelling. Imagine finding two cars, maybe one from the 1950s and one from today, looking almost identical side by side.
Okay.
But there's absolutely no clear design lineage connecting them. No paper trail, nothing obvious.
Right. It makes you stop and think, doesn't it? How could that happen? What's the missing piece?
Exactly. That feeling of a missing link, it just grabs you. It suggests we might need to, reframe how we think cultural exchange even works.
Mm-hmm. When something that looks like it should have faded away or evolved just pops up again centuries later, you got to look beyond the usual explanations.
And that's precisely the puzzle we're here to unravel for you today. Our deep dive is into the remarkable journey of a particular type of small boat. It's known across different eras and cultures as the Biscayne Shallop.
Or, depending on who is talking and where, a chalupa or a chaloupe.
Right. And our mission today, we're going to trace its really surprising, incredibly indirect path through the waters of the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
And in doing so, we'll see how maritime tech, local customs, and some really unexpected cultural mixing actually shaped the foundations of early North American identity.
We'll be looking at archaeological finds, historical records, stuff that really shines a light on an overlooked middle ground where these transmissions, which seem impossible on the surface, actually took root.
And guiding us through this, we're drawing heavily on an academic chapter. It's called Cultural Transmissions of the Biscayne Shallop in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, 1560-1750.
Written by Brad Lowen.
That's right, by Brad Lowen from the book The Archaeology of Vernacular Watercraft. So it gives us a really solid, scholarly lens to look through.
It helps us see past just the surface appearances and really get into the nuts and bolts of this historical mystery. Okay, so with that intriguing setup, let's zoom right in on the stars of our show, these boats themselves. We're talking about two actual vessels found centuries apart, different sides of the St. Lawrence Basin, but they look, strikingly similar, almost eerily so. First up, picture this. A 16th century Basque chalupa. It was found deep in the waters off Red Bay, Labrador, dating back to around 1565.
And Red Bay, we should emphasize, wasn't just some minor outpost. It was a huge Basque whaling station, a major industrial site for its time.
A global enterprise, really. Then you fast forward nearly 200 years to 1751, and we find an 18th century Canadian chaloupe.
Unearthed right in Quebec City.
Right, in the colonial hub. And this boat was mainly used for local river and estuary transport during the French colonial period.
So what's immediately striking, as you said, isn't just the look of them. The physical resemblance is uncanny, despite that huge gap in time and space.
Yeah.
But it's also that linguistic link. The names. Chalupa, chaloupe.
It's so close.
It's almost the same word, used by totally different groups, centuries apart, for what looks like the same kind of boat. It's a powerful hint that something deeper is going on.
A really powerful hint, and it immediately brings up our main question. What is their cultural parentage? Where did this shared design come from if it wasn't a direct line?
Because that's what researchers looked for initially, right? The logical thing.
Exactly. They looked for that direct European transmission. They scoured archives, expecting to find, records of Basque boat builders moving to New France, setting up shop, continuing their traditions. But, and this is key to the mystery, they found nothing. Zip. Nada.
Right. And this ties into the prevailing historical thinking for a long time, which assumed this sort of fundamental fracture line.
Yeah, fracture line.
Yeah, between the 16th century seasonal Basque fishermen and the 17th century French permanent colonists. They were seen as really distinct groups.
Different goals, different ways of life.
Totally. The Basques came seasonally for whaling or cod fishing, stayed a few months, then went back to Europe. Big operations, but temporary presence each year.
Whereas the French colonists were there to stay, building towns, farms, a whole new society.
Exactly. Their interactions were often limited, sometimes even adversarial because of, economic competition, geopolitical stuff.
And the research, like you said, seemed to back this up. No evidence of Basque boat builders showing up in Quebec City records, for instance.
Right. They looked hard. Found about 20 known boat builders in colonial Quebec City, mostly from other parts of France like La Rochelle or Normandy, or born right there in Canada.
But not a single one documented as Basque.
Nope. So the obvious explanation, Basque guy teaches French guy how to build this specific boat, just doesn't hold water based on the records. It's a dead end.
Which deepens the mystery considerably. It creates this void, doesn't it, where a direct connection should be, but isn't.
That historical fracture line idea became, well, a bit of a barrier to understanding what really happened.
So if it wasn't direct transmission, Europe to Europe style, what was it? This is where the story takes a really clever turn, doesn't it?
It does. It leads us away from the formal records and into the practical everyday world of the Basque fishery itself.
And into the broader context of the Gulf of St. Lawrence. When you look at that whole region with more open mind, you start to see a different path emerging.
An indirect path.
Oh.
Overlooked before.
Yeah, serpentine, indirect, and ultimately maybe far more significant for how culture actually moved.
And it puts the shallop right at the heart of early Canadian material culture. It weaves it into this common context involving both the fisheries and the early colonies.
So this is our first real aha moment, right? And the transmission wasn't direct. It happened through some other more complex, maybe more organic process.
Precisely. An indirect path that forces us to rethink how maritime culture travels, especially in a place like the New World. Forget simple straight lines from Europe. Think adaptation, exchange, informal networks.
Okay, let's really dig into these two boats now. Let's get specific. Starting with the older one, the Red Bay chalupa from around 1565.
Right. Red Bay, Labrador, known to the Basques as buttress.
Vultures. Gives you a sense of the place.
It does. Rugged, resource-rich. And as we mentioned, it's Canada's most extensive, best-preserved 16th century archaeological site. Just an incredible window into that Basque whaling world.
And Parks Canada archaeologists working on the wreck of the San Juan, that Basque whaler that sank in 65.
Yeah, a tragic event, but archaeologically amazing.
They actually found 3 of these smaller chalupas underneath its wreckage, like nested dolls.
And the most complete one has been restored. It's on display now. You can see it touch the past almost.
So what did it look like? What are the specs?
Okay, so this Basque chalupa, the restored one, is about 8 meters long, 8.02 to be exact, about 2 meters wide, and just under a meter high amidships.
Not huge, but sturdy looking.
Definitely. It has the smoothly rounded bottom and the stem and stern post curve elegantly upwards from the keel. Classic lines.
And the construction, you mentioned that was telling.
Very telling. The lower planks, the strakes, they were Carville built, laid edge to edge for a smooth hull.
Okay.
But, and this is the key detail, the upper 2 strakes were clinker built, overlapping planks, like siding on a house.
Why is that mix so important? What does it tell us?
Well, 2 things. Practically, Carville is good for the main hull, smooth and strong. Clinker up top adds strength but maybe saves weight, good for rough seas or handling.
Right.
But more critically for our story, this specific combination points directly to a design rooted in sophisticated Renaissance geometric methods. These weren't crude boats.
Highly engineered.
Exactly. Techniques found in naval books and wrecks across Europe from the 14th to 17th centuries. Built from good European hardwoods, like oak. It was a modern, well-understood design for its time.
And clearly a workhorse. Built for whaling, which must have been incredibly tough.
Absolutely brutal work. And the boat reflects that. It had a fixed mast step midship, probably for a mainsail, but also a mobile step up in the bow, plus holes for lines. That suggests it could also use a lug sail rig, which is very versatile.
Sail and oar.
Definitely both. You see, well-worn full pins the pegs for oars and rowing boards. Clearly rowed a lot.
Makes sense for hunting whales.
And there's even evidence for both a rudder and a stern oar. The idea is maybe the steersman used the oar for quick maneuvers during the hunt and the rudder for general sailing. Super adaptable.
Amazing ingenuity. And historically, these were central to the whole operation.
Oh, absolutely crucial. The heart of the hunt, they go offshore, chase down whales, harpoon them, and then tow these enormous carcasses back to the shore stations for processing into oil.
Big business.
Huge. The 16th century Basque transatlantic fishery was massive. Red Bay was a key hub. Whaling really took off around 1543, peaked in the 1570s, then declined kind of abruptly around 1579.
Why did decline? Overhunting.
That's part of the thinking, yeah. Also shifting economics, maybe conflict elsewhere. But it didn't vanish completely. It continued sporadically for decades, even into the 1730s.
And as whaling faded,
cod fishing expanded massively. Basques moved into areas like Gaspé and western Newfoundland, the Basque coast. They were fishing cod there from 1517 all the way to 1767.
So these Red Bay chalupas, they represent that early, really robust phase of Basque maritime power in North America, rooted in a deep European tradition.
Precisely. Okay, now let's jump forward again, almost 2 centuries.
Leaving rugged Labrador behind, heading west to the St. Lawrence River to Quebec City.
the 18th century chaloupe. This one was found buried in the mud at the tidal foreshore, right in the city's commercial port area.
And the site itself has history, owned first by a boat builder, Etienne Corbin.
Right, and later by a merchant who backfilled a wharf, basically creating a time capsule by burying 7 small boats, including this key chaloupe.
Lucky for us. So how did this one compare to the Basque version? Bigger?
Noticeably bigger, yeah. The most complete one they found was almost 13 meters long, 12.76 meters, about 2.5 meters wide, 1.2 meters high, a more substantial vessel.
Similar shape, though, that curved stem and stern.
Yes, that elegant upward curve from the keel is still there. A clear visual link.
But the construction was different.
Big difference here. All the strakes on the Quebec City boat were Carvel built. Smooth hull all the way up. None of that mixed Carzel clinker we saw on the Basque chalupa.
Interesting. Suggests maybe a different tradition or an evolution.
Could be. Maybe more influenced by French methods, or maybe just an adaptation to river use versus open ocean whaling. It also had 2 mast steps, midship and bow, clearly for a lug sail rig.
Okay.
And evidence of a rudder. But, and this is important, absolutely zero evidence of oars.
Yeah.
No thole pins, nothing.
So primarily a sailing vessel.
Seems like it. Suggests a different job. Not the intense maneuvering of whaling, but maybe more steady transport along the river.
Makes sense for colonial trade. But despite these differences, size, construction, propulsion, you said there was a deeper connection.
This is the kicker. When they analyzed the hull's geometry, the underlying shape, it used the exact same ancient design methods found in the Red Bay chalupa.
Wow. The same blueprint, centuries later.
Essentially, yes. That shared design foundation is a massive piece of the puzzle. It's like the boat's DNA passed down, even if the outward features changed. It defied that apparent fracture line.
That continuity is incredible. And the context for this Quebec boat was totally different too, right? Colonial life.
Completely different world. Quebec City's notary records, starting around 1663, show a thriving boat-building industry already in full swing. And the chaloupe was right there from the start.
What were they used for?
They were the absolute lifeline for moving stuff around French colonial Quebec, redistributing goods that came into the port, collecting cargo like packaged merchandise.
And bringing supplies into the city.
Crucial role there, bringing in hay, wood, fresh meat from the farms and rural areas up and down the river to feed the growing city. They were usually owned by professional sailors, sometimes hiring crews.
And Quebec City itself was booming by then.
It grew slowly after 1608, but really took off in the 1660s. Military, religious, administrative, commercial center. These chaloupes fit right into that final busy phase of the French regime before the British conquest.
And you mentioned something about the name changing.
Yeah, a curious detail. Around 1715, the name chaloupe for these larger working boats starts to fade from the records.
Replaced by?
Bateau. Just the generic French word for boat, but it clearly referred to the same type of vessel.
Why the change?
The source suggests it was linked to new notaries, influential newcomers arriving, who maybe didn't use the traditional Quebec nautical terms. Shows how even language reflects subtle power shifts.
Okay, so summing up this part. 2 distinct worlds. 16th century Basque whalers in Labrador, 18th century French colonists in Quebec.
Right.
Different boats for different jobs.
Right, different sizes, construction details, propulsion methods.
Yet that shared underlying design, that shared name root, and no obvious record of direct transfer between European groups.
Exactly. The lack of a direct link forces us to look elsewhere, to look for that indirect, more complex path of transmission.
Which brings us to how this might have actually happened, and it seems to revolve around the life cycle of the Basque chalupa itself and these customs of Terra Nova.
This is where it gets really interesting. These Basque whaling crews, remember, were seasonal. Leave Basque Country in June, spend maybe 120 intense days in Labrador, August to December, then head home in January.
Highly organized.
Very. Captains usually paid for the boat's construction back home, then sold it to the harpooners.
Sold it.
Yeah, then charged them for transport and assembly over in Labrador. The harpooner's profit was tied to his whale kills, minus the boat's depreciation.
Complex system. But what happened to the boats at the end of the season? Did they haul them all back to Europe?
Almost never. That's the pivotal point. It was incredibly rare for a chalupa to go back. Too much trouble. Too costly.
So what did they do with them?
Most were carefully sunk in freshwater ponds or lagoons near the whaling stations.
Sunk. On purpose.
Yes. Deliberately submerged to keep the wooden planks swollen and the joints tight over the winter, prevent them from drying out and falling apart in the harsh freeze-thaw cycles.
Wow. So this wasn't just abandonment, it was a preservation strategy.
Exactly. But the effect was the same. Hundreds of European boats were being left behind in North America every single year. It created this huge, unintended stockpile of maritime technology.
A repository, just sitting there.
And this wasn't chaotic. It actually created a sort of informal secondary economy. The archives are full of contracts, lawsuits, disputes over these shallops left behind.
Really? Examples?
Oh, yeah. There's a case from 1551. Esteban de Arizaga sells a chalupa in what's now Quebec to a colleague. The colleague dies without paying. 10 years later, Arizaga is still suing the widow.
Yeah, persistence.
Or Blasio de Echabe in 1572, claiming money because someone moved his overwintering chalupa without permission.
Yeah.
Or Andres de Omencha in 1549, selling pinasas, another small boat type left at Blanc-Sablon.
So these weren't just forgotten objects. There was value, ownership, disputes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lively, recognized, if informal, economy operating around these boats, even when the owners were back in Europe.
This leads to the unhanded boats, right? The chalupas desmontaradas?
Exactly. Literally deserted or abandoned shallops. Boats left by harpooners who maybe weren't planning to come back next season.
And the Basque legal records actually talk about the rules for these.
Amazingly, yes. Civil suits give us insight into the unwritten but clearly understood and applied customs. The customs of Terra Nova.
Terra Nova meaning Newfoundland and Labrador?
Broadly, yes. That whole Basque fishing territory. Take Lorenzo de Mutio's case in 1565. He planned to use his own old boat left unhanded, finds it leaky.
Okay.
He hires a carpenter, fixes it up himself, has a great whaling season. Then he sues for the pay rate he would have gotten if he'd used a new boat, arguing he bore the cost and risk of the repair.
And did he win?
He did. It shows his pragmatic approach. You could use these boats, fix them up, and the system recognized the value you added.
Incredible. How were these customs enforced without, police or government?
Pure necessity and shared understanding. The whalers policed it themselves through communal expectation. Everyone benefited if the system worked.
Gotcha. Any other examples of these customs?
A key one is Joseph de Econes' case from 1578. He leaves 2 chalupas in Terra Nova, tells a colleague he can use them.
Okay, seems straightforward.
But the captain of the next voyage takes them instead, loses one at sea. And then get this, he lends the other one to some French cod fishermen in exchange for a barrel of wine.
Wow. Bold.
So Econes takes him to court back in the Basque country, and the court explicitly asks for testimony on his due according to the customs of the province of Terra Nova.
So the customs were legally recognized, even back in Europe.
Seems so. Witnesses testified it was general knowledge anyone could use an unhanded chalupa, even without the owner's explicit say-so.
What was the standard rent?
Usually 1 barrack, a barrel of whale oil per year, essentially a rental fee.
And if the boat got lost or damaged?
If you'd paid the rent, the original owner bore the loss. It was considered part of the deal. And crucially, it was customary to leave borrowed chalupas in Terra Nova. Don't tow them back. Keep the cycle going.
This is profound. So these customs meant hundreds of boats were abandoned annually, but within a functional system, which made it incredibly easy for 16th century Indigenous peoples to get their hands on shallops.
Exactly. Not just acquire the object, but potentially adapt the social rules around their use too.
This wasn't theft necessarily, but tapping into an existing, albeit informal, system of circulation.
Precisely. It created this unexpected systemic pathway for cultural transfer, the crucial indirect path we were looking for. It turned the coast into this open-air library of boat designs.
Ready for borrowing and adaptation.
Ready for recontextualization by native societies. And they absolutely ran with it.
Which brings us right to the next chapter. The shallop in the native sphere. Indigenous people were interested in European boats from the get-go, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Right from the early 16th century, Cartier meets Iroquois speakers in a boat in 1534, returning from the European fishing fleets. They're already interacting.
Iroquois from near Quebec City trading with Basques in 1542.
Basques even hired natives sometimes for fishing work, but it wasn't always friendly. That 1543 incident where Basque carpenters were ambushed, their chalupas stolen and sailed off in.
Shows they knew how to handle them early on and wanted them.
Definitely shows competence and desire. They saw the utility. Fast forward a century, and you have Nicolas Denis, the Acadian fishing outfitter.
Right, writing in the 17th century.
He specifically notes how popular shallops were among the Micmac. He says they only used canoes for rivers, but everyone had shallops for the sea.
And how did they get them, according to Denis?
Sometimes bought them, he says, but most often they took them from where the captains hide them, or in ponds.
directly referencing those overwintering spots, a continuation of the customs of Terra Nova.
Exactly. Denis, being a colonizer, saw it as theft, but he clearly recognized it was an established, widespread practice. The system was still operating.
So this transfer of shallops and know-how to indigenous groups wasn't just a few isolated incidents. It was common, systematic, starting in the 16th century.
By the early 17th century, European colonists regularly encountered natives in shallops, cruising the Gulf, the Atlantic coast, doing their own thing.
Like that English ship in 1607, hailed by a Biscayne Shallop with 8 native sailors and a boy.
Incredible image, isn't it? Speaking French, wanting to trade, mentioning their chief commander, Messamouet.
Oh, was Messamouet?
An influential Micmac chief at La Heve, Nova Scotia. And get this, he wasn't just a user of shallops. He was known as an accomplished builder of them.
Building them himself?
Yeah, for French fishermen and for other natives. He even spent a winter in France around 1580, shows a deep mastery of the tech and the culture around it.
Wow. And chief member too?
Another powerful figure. In 1607, he reportedly summoned a fleet of 50 to 70 shallops carrying 400 warriors for a revenge expedition.
50 to 70 shallops. That's a serious fleet.
It is, and he boasted about it in song to the French colonists. It shows the shallop had quickly become this symbol of status, power, military might within Micmac society.
It's amazing how quickly they seem to have adopted them. They were already master canoeists. Why the shallop?
Well, the shallop offered real advantages on the open sea. Bigger capacity for trade goods or catch. More stability in waves. Better sailing performance over long distances, crucial for their coastal networks.
So it complemented the canoe, didn't replace it?
Exactly. Different tools for different jobs. They were natural seafarers, and the shallop was a powerful addition to their toolkit.
And they made it their own, culturally.
Completely. Marc Lescarbot in 1608 described seeing a native shallop with a moose painted on its sail. That's pure symbolic integration, putting their own totemic marks on this European technology.
Crafting their culture onto it.
And Europeans were constantly amazed by their sailing skills. Jesuit Jerome Lalemant marveled at how they navigated open water without compasses, using imagination, deep knowledge of currents, stars, landmarks.
English colonists in 1602 were stunned to meet savages in a Biscayne Shallop who knew place names like Placentia and spoke some Christian words.
It shows this deep integration wasn't just about the boat, it was about the whole packaged language, navigation, trade networks.
Which brings us right to Richard White's concept of the middle ground. Can you quickly define that for us?
Sure. White saw the middle ground as this dynamic space of cultural contact, often before formal colonization really took hold. It wasn't one side imposing on the other.
More like a mixing zone.
Exactly. A space of mutual adaptation where both Europeans and indigenous peoples figured out how to deal with each other, borrowing and reinterpreting objects, practices, meanings to make sense in this shared new world.
And the shallop was a key element in this St. Lawrence middle ground.
Arguably one of the most significant pieces of European material culture transferred, valued by both sides, efficient, versatile, and, thanks to the customs of Terra Nova, relatively easy to get hold of.
So it wasn't just a boat, it was a catalyst for change within this middle ground.
Absolutely. For native communities, it helped graft their economy onto the transatlantic fishery, led to native boat building, caring for European gear off-season, expanding their own hunting and trade.
And changed social structures.
Chiefs who mastered sailing and tapped into European trade gained new influence. It shifted power dynamics. It enabled natives to build new trade networks, linking coastal Europeans with inland groups.
A whole new economic and social landscape emerging.
Yes. Now, this middle ground wasn't permanent. It was transitory. Eventually, as European colonial power grew, things shifted again. But White argues it was a necessary precondition for successful colonization. It created a shared operational basis.
It flips the script, doesn't it? It's not just colonists arriving and surviving thanks to helpful Indians. It's a complex, functioning bicultural society already in place.
Precisely. It highlights indigenous agency and ingenuity in shaping that early colonial world. They weren't just passive bystanders.
Okay, now let's look at how this middle ground actually forged a new identity, linked to the name Canadians. This part is fascinating, showing how identities shift.
It really is. So originally back in the 1530s, 40s, Jacques Cartier used Canadian to refer to the Iroquois-speaking people around Quebec City, maize farmers, village dwellers.
The ones who disappeared.
Right. They had this migratory pattern farming near Quebec, then heading east to the Gulf in summer to fish and hunt seals. They were trading with Basques early on, but then, poof, they vanished from the St. Lawrence Valley between 1543 and 1585. Still a bit of historical mystery.
But the name Canadian didn't vanish.
No. And this is the intriguing part. It pops up again in the early 17th century, but applied to a totally different group.
Who were they?
A Christianized native community, mainly Micmac, living down on Chaleur Bay, places like Percé and Miscou, people who had generations of close contact with French and Basque fishermen.
And the thinking is this new Canadian identity was built around
their Europeanized lifestyle, their close ties to the fishery, and crucially, according to historian Gervais Carpin, their widespread use and mastery of Biscayne Shallops.
The boat itself became a defining feature of their identity.
It seems so. Look at Champlain. Writing in Quebec City in 1624, he makes a point of distinguishing between French barques and Canadian chaloupe.
Using different words for similar boats depending on who was using them.
Exactly. For a guy like Champlain, usually pretty concise, making that distinction is significant. It shows these Canadians were seen as a distinct group, partly defined by their boats.
A statement, not just a vessel.
And the perfect embodiment of this identity. A guy named Juan Chu.
Juan Chu. Sounds Basque.
It's a classic Basque diminutive of Juan. He was a capitaine sauvage, a respected leader among these Chaleur Bay Canadians. His name alone suggests either Basque ancestry or deep cultural ties.
And he played a key role.
Hugely important intermediary. Basque whalers trusted him completely, leaving vital supplies with him and his people over the winter.
Wow.
When a Basque ship burned in 1624, Juan Chu arranged for the crew to get home safely. When Quebec faced a crisis after an English attack in 1628, Champlain himself asked Juan Chu to shelter French colonists or help them get passage back to France on Basque ships leaving from Gaspé.
A real bridge between worlds, a super connector.
Absolutely. His influence was recognized even in France. His son met King Louis XIII. An Ursuline nun in 1639 noted these Canadians were more polite than local Montagnais, sang Christian songs in their own language.
So a blended culture, comfortable in both worlds.
Totally at ease in the fisherman's world. The boats, the contracts, the seasonal rhythm. They were the welcoming committee, really, for French colonists, smoothing the way.
And we see this geographically, too, on maps.
Yeah, 17th century maps consistently place these Canadians in southeastern Gaspé, Chaleur Bay. That strategic location, plus their shallop tech, their European connections, it likely gave them an advantage.
Maybe even helping them take over old Iroquoian routes, coinciding with that disappearance.
It's plausible. The chaloupe wasn't just transport, it was an instrument of power, reshaping regional dynamics. The exact lengths are debated, but the timing is suggestive.
And this wasn't just in Chaleur Bay.
There are hints of similar middle ground communities elsewhere, like Pequeño Canada or Petite Canada up in the northeastern Gulf, suggesting Basque-Innu contact too. This phenomenon was likely quite widespread.
But identities shift again. After about 1640, Canadian starts to mean something else.
Right. It gradually begins to refer to the country-born descendants of the French colonists, the meaning we largely recognize today.
So the original middle ground Canadians, the term shifts away from them.
Yes. It signals that the middle ground itself in that specific maritime form was moving on, shifting west towards the Great Lakes, taking new shapes. The shallop's direct role in defining that identity in the St. Lawrence was fading.
But its legacy was embedded.
Deeply embedded. It shows how fluid identity is and how profoundly material culture, like a boat, can shape it.
Okay, let's bring it all home. Back to Quebec City. The final link in the chain, connecting that 1565 Basque chalupa to the 1751 Canadian chaloupe.
This connection crystallizes when we look at those colonial notary records starting in 1663. They show this booming boat-building industry, already well established.
And the chaloupe is there right from the start?
Oh yeah, the chaloupe and the bark are the earliest, most common types being built.
What were these Quebec chaloupes like in that period, 1663, 1700?
Robust working boats, carrying capacity or burthen of 3 to 10 tons, typically around 11 meters long. No deck, making them easy to load and unload.
Perfect for river trade.
Exactly. They dominated that medium-range transport on the St. Lawrence, moving goods up and down the river, in and out of Quebec City. Most frequently mentioned private boat in the records for that period.
And you mentioned using data analysis, a battleship curve.
Right. It's a way archaeologists and historians visualize how the popularity of an artifact or type rises, peaks, and declines over time.
Like the life cycle of a product.
Exactly. And when you plot the data for boat construction in Quebec City, the curve shows the chaloupe was already at its peak popularity, right when the records start in 1663.
Meaning it must have become popular earlier.
Precisely. If you project that curve backward, it strongly suggests the chaloupe's main adoption phase in Quebec City was likely in the 1630s or 1640s.
And that timing is crucial.
Absolutely critical. Yeah. Because the 1630s-40s is exactly when contact with those chaloupe Canadians was frequent, and when the name Canada was starting to be applied to the French colonists' children born in Canada.
So the colonists likely adopted the shallop not directly from France,
but from the existing middle ground culture, from the native and mixed ancestry Canadians who had already adapted and perfected the Biscayne Shallop for local conditions.
They learned from the locals who had already blended European tech with New World know-how.
That's the strong implication. It's the culmination of that indirect transmission path. The Quebec chaloupe wasn't just a French import. It was a New World adaptation filtered through the middle ground,
making it truly a Canadian boat in the deepest sense. It embodies that whole blended history.
Exactly. It shows how colonial success often relied on plugging into the existing social and economic infrastructure of these middle grounds, rather than just trying to recreate Europe from scratch. Adaptation was key.
But things changed again in the 18th century. The middle ground's direct influence faded.
In its maritime form in the St. Lawrence, yes. Early 18th century, the names barque and chaloupe start disappearing from Quebec records for those main working boats.
Replaced by bateau.
Right, the generic term. And the word chaloupe itself gets repurposed.
How so?
It starts referring to a smaller boat, maybe 8 meters long, often called a chaloupe biscayenne or chaloupe de bateau. Basically a tender and auxiliary craft for larger ships. Ironically, this new, smaller chaloupe function in size is almost identical to the original 16th century Basque whaling chalupa.
Full circle.
Almost poetic, isn't it? The original form reemerges in a new context. At the same time, you see new ship types appearing in Quebec: brigantine, galette, schooner, reflecting designs coming from France and the Anglo-American colonies.
So new tech, new names, signaling a shift.
These shifts signal the closing chapter of that 16th century middle ground's direct maritime influence on the St. Lawrence. The middle ground itself, as a concept, moves west to the Great Lakes, takes different forms. The Biscayne Shallop's era of direct influence was over, but its legacy was baked in.
Wow, what an incredible story. Just tracing that one boat type, the shallop, chalupa, reveals so much.
It really does, from Basque whaleboats in Labrador.
Through those ingenious customs of Terra Nova.
To being adopted and remade by native societies like the Micmac.
Becoming a symbol of a new Canadian identity in that chaloupe middle ground.
And finally integrating as this essential colonial workhorse in Quebec City.
It's such a surprising indirect path, completely overturns that idea of a simple, linear European transfer.
And it just highlights how crucial context is. It'll look beyond the obvious links, broaden the lens. Recognizing the Gulf as this vibrant middle ground was key.
It unlocked a richer, more complex, and frankly more interesting story about early North American history.
And it shows this isn't just about old boats, is it? It's about how cultures interact, how they adapt, how they innovate, how they create something entirely new, even in tough circumstances.
And those seemingly small details, a planking technique, an informal custom about borrowing boats, they can have huge long-term impacts. Shaping societies, shaping identities like Canadian.
Absolutely. That's why digging into this kind of the material history is so rewarding. It reveals the hidden wiring.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other historical fracture lines, places where the connections seem broken?
Might actually be hidden middle grounds, waiting for us to look deeper, beyond the formal records, into the broader context.
Yeah. What other stories of cultural blending, of adaptation and ingenuity are just sitting there in the objects around us, waiting to change how we understand the foundations of our own societies?
That is definitely something worth thinking about. A fantastic question to leave hanging until our next deep dive.